Hello everyone! We're now back with Titan Quest walkthrough, and in this episode we're gonna be navigating through the Minoan Labyrinth in Knossos. And at the end of the labyrinth there is a Minotaur, just like in the mythology. Of course we won't get to the Minotaur in this episode since the labyrinth is huge, but we are gonna cover pretty much 80 to 90% of the labyrinth and face the Minotaur in the next episode. And great job, we're greeted with a couple of Limos to begin with. Alright, I promised in the previous episode that the game mechanic I'll discuss in this episode will be the damage over time. And damage over time is, as the name says, are the types of damage that are dealt over time. They're not instantaneous. They take several seconds to act completely. And there are several types of damage over time, or DOT, as I will refer to from now on. DOT is the abbreviation. And the DOT damage types are, so we got poison, got bleeding, we got life leech, and then we also have the ones which are elemental in nature, which are burn, frost burn, or frostbite, and electric burn, and I think that's it. There might be a few other types which I'm forgetting, but yeah, these are pretty much, should be clear now what I'm talking about. And the way they work is that it usually says, for example, let's say it says 50 damage over 5 seconds, which means that it will deal, over the course of 5 seconds, it will deal 50 damage and it will disperse it equally throughout. So that means each 1 second it will deal 10 damage. And this is actually how it's applied in DPS as well. It's applied only by the first second. So for example, if you got a sword that gives 50 damage over 5 seconds, your DPS will only gain 10 damage, because DPS is damage per second. So it shows how much it will go per 1 second. But even that still causes inaccuracies for the DPS, because the damage that's dealt over 1 second is not the same as damage that's dealt instantaneously. But anyways, and you obviously be getting bonuses, like for example, sometimes it'll say extra, say if this is 50 poison damage we're dealing over 5 seconds, it might say plus 50% poison damage. It means the overall damage it'll deal will be 50% higher. But then it also comes slightly harder bit, is when you have the duration increase. Sometimes it might say plus percent increase to the duration. So how does that work? Does that mean it's gonna spread out the same amount of damage over a longer duration? Because that's gonna suck. But what it actually does is that, if I'm not mistaken here, I'm pretty sure I've double checked it, what happens is that as the duration increases, it continues the same damage rate per second onto the continued duration. So let me give you an example. Like if you take our example of 50 damage per 5 seconds, and let's say we've got something that gives a bonus plus 20% improved duration. It means that 20% of 5 seconds is 1 second, so the damage is now going to be spread over 6 seconds. Except it will continue with the 10 damage per second as we had before. So now, instead of dealing 50 damage, it will deal overall of 60 damage. If you see what I mean, yeah? So it'll go 60 damage over 6 seconds, because it continues the same rate, 10 damage per second. And finally, what I should also mention about damage over time is how they stack. The same type of damage, it doesn't stack at all. Like for example, if we say we've done 50 damage over 5 seconds with poison, and then 2 seconds later we're hitting with the same thing, it doesn't mean it's suddenly gonna add up to 100 damage. You know? It's actually gonna reapply this poison damage. So if you've only dealt out of, if let's say of the 5 seconds of 50 poison damage, you've only done 2 seconds, and then you've attacked again, it means only 20 damage will go, and then it will reapply the 50 damage from scratch, from the beginning. So overall you'll only deal 70. However, the different types of dot damage, they do stack up. So for example, if you're dealing poison and then let's say you're also dealing burn is not going to override the poison, it will actually, they will go together at the same time. So it is nice in that sort of sense. Overall, dot types of damage are not so good to rely on in this game, because you actually want to be dealing damage to enemies instantly. especially when it comes to higher difficulties like legendary. You want to kill enemies as fast as possible. You don't want to give them a chance to, survive for the next few seconds. I mean, if you really do want to concentrate on damage over time, I would highly advise you to concentrate your as much of your gear as possible on that damage type. For example, if you're concentrating on poison, you need to have as many poison modifiers as possible, so that there will be monstrous bonuses that will kill the enemies really quickly. And even then, if say you're concentrating just on poison, then poison resistant enemies, they're gonna be pretty much barely affected, and you're gonna be in big trouble. So yeah, damage over time is only good really as a supportive damage type. I wouldn't entirely rely on it. And another thing is, if you are really wanting to build a damage over time build, is that you'll need to reduce the enemy resistances to that damage. So for example, skill you got in the Spirit Mastery called Necrosis is good for reducing vitality and bleeding resistances. So that means if you're gonna be fighting the undead and you've got Necrosis on, it will mean that you'll be able to bleed the undead and cause vitality type damage on them, even though they're completely immune to it to begin with. So yeah, that I think pretty much is what you need to know about damage over time. I hope I didn't miss anything, but these are pretty much the important facts about it. So I hope that was helpful. And now we've reached the first rebirth fountain in the Labyrinth. This one is quite far from a previous one, but the ones ahead will be actually quite lightly spaced. There'll be quite a lot of them coming up. So if you actually notice the labyrinth, it will be divided into pretty much 3 big chunks. We've just gone through the first big chunk, and now we're going to be going through the second big chunk, which will have like the next 3 or 4 rebirth fountains. And you've probably noticed there's loads of these traps in the labyrinth. And once again we're facing Limos. These Limos, I don't know if you noticed, but we've been facing quite a lot of them already, and there's going to be a lot more as the video goes on. Trust me, I got fed up of fighting them by the end of this video. But yeah, with the traps, if you notice, I'm kind of luring the enemies away from the traps so that the traps don't hurt me whilst I'm fighting. And that's a good technique to go about. So yeah, if you see Limos once again, they usually like to come in pairs as well, if you notice. Alright, another thing I was also asked to talk about is the pet gameplay. But what classes are the best for the petmancer builds, for builds managing pets and relying on them to mostly do, all the damage and stuff. This is actually a good question, but it is a quite hard question to answer, and I can't really pick one class out of the bunch and say this is the best class for pet gameplay. But each class that has pets will actually, it will fit a certain playstyle. So it depends on what you're looking for really, whether you're looking for damage dealing or someone to tank, or maybe someone to just simply buff you. And so here are the pets. So we've got, if we go through all the masteries, in nature we have the wolves and a nymph. In spirit we have a lich king and the outsider, which is a temporary pet. Then in earth we have core dweller. In storm we have a wisp. In dream we have nightmare. In rogue we have traps. In warfare we have ancestral warriors, which are temporary pets. In hunting we have a monster lure, which is not strictly speaking a pet, but it still acts as a pet. And defense we have nobody. Defense is just you. So all those pets that I've mentioned, it means they're separate entities which act in some way to help you beat the enemies. And the way you go about this, basically what kind of role you need your pet to fulfill. For example, a core dweller is a fantastic tank. He's good at drawing enemies away from you and absorbing the damage, but he's shit at damage dealing because he can't really deal that much damage. And then on the other hand, we've got pets like, well, I have like a lich king and wolves, which can deal a lot of damage, in particular in the latter difficulties like epic and legendary. And then we have also pets such as the wisp and nightmare, which are good for as a supporting role. Wisp is particularly good for buffing you because his Eye of the Storm skill gives you a good buff, and Nightmare has a Mastermind skill which buffs not only you but also all your other pets. So he's pretty good, like in combination with wolves, for example. Think about that. So it's all about the kind of combination on what niche you need to fill. Like I'd say, for example, a Conjurer would be a nice class, which is Earth and Spirit, because as you can see, the Lich King and the Core Dweller, they fill out separate niches. Lich King is a powerful damage dealer, whilst the Core Dweller is a tank. He'll be drawing the enemies away from you. And and the Spirit Mastery also has the Outsider, which is fantastic temporary pet. Although he's only lasts 1 minute or so, but he's good for those really tough parts, like when you're about to face a boss or a particularly tough monster group. You can unleash him on them, and he'll fight bravely by your side. And then the Ancestral Warriors in Warfare, they're not particularly powerful, but they're good at sort of stalling the enemy for a bit as a distraction. And the traps in the Rogue Mastery are pretty nice if you're going for a specific type of rogue character. I mean, if you are pretty much concentrating all the damage on yourself, if you can tank the damage as well and deal a lot of damage, you won't really need them that much. But then again, not many rogue characters can, unless you say like a Corsair or something. But if you're say a Brigand who uses a bow and needs to keep enemies away from you, then you will need those traps. So yeah, this is, as I said, it is difficult to pick a single class, but it's all about what's required really, on what you need. Right, and we're coming across some of the smaller Minotaurs, if you notice, in this labyrinth, and for the most part they're not too bad, except these darker ones that you notice. They're actually slightly tough ones because they use Onslaught, if you notice the yellow rings around them when they fight, and they also have the horn attack that when they headbutt you with their horns, and that I think, if I remember correctly, it stuns you, so you gotta be careful of that. Oh yeah, in the mythology, of course, the Minoan Labyrinth, that was to keep the Minotaur, and it was built by Daedalus, who, as I mentioned in the previous episode already, and it was King Minos who wanted it. And the Minotaur, he was basically getting the sacrifices of young men and young women, sacrificed so he could devour them. And eventually Minotaur was killed by a guy named Theseus, who's one of the heroes from mythology, and he was sent as one of the sacrifices basically. But he really wanted to slay the Minotaur. So, and what he did, he got help from this chick named Ariadne, who gave him a thread, like a ball of thread. So he used the thread to navigate around the labyrinth so he could really find his way back afterwards. And at the end he killed the Minotaur, which, if I remember correctly, was actually sleeping at the time, so Theseus had an easy job of killing him. But I think it differs in different versions of the myth. So yeah, Minotaur is not as tough as he seems. And of course in this game we're gonna be killing the Minotaur. Also yeah, if you notice, these Conqueror Minotaurs, they also cast Rally skill. Rally is a skill you might find you'll find in the Defense Mastery, and it basically buffs you up a bit and also restores some of the health. So if you notice, those bastards keep casting in and restoring health to them and their nearby allies. So yeah, we're nearly getting to the end of the second third of the labyrinth, and we're gonna be getting to another rebirth fountain soon. You might notice we already come across quite a number of rebirth fountains. These automatons were really pissing me off here, because I kept trying to destroy the trap and they wouldn't let me. Alright, let's see what's in here. Diogenes Ring. It's a green. And Diogenes Ring is actually good for the mages, if you notice, because it gives you percentage bonuses to intelligence and energy. That means it will always be useful no matter how much. In fact, the higher amounts of those you have, the bigger the bonus will be. And once again, I don't know if you've been counting, but there's been tons of Limos. In fact, if anyone is counting out there, I would be really interested to know how many Limos I've faced in this episode, because I'm pretty sure there must be more than a dozen. There's probably 20 or something, or around that number. It's crazy. I don't think I remember ever facing that many Limos in such a short time. And they're not exactly easy enemies, they're pretty tough, they could actually kill you. And they're life leech. They often manage to, if they do their life leech attack, they manage to drain health from you faster than you can damage them, which is well annoying. If you notice, there's so many different monster types in the labyrinth. We've faced Well, we faced the undead, we faced demons, we faced beastmen. Who else have we faced? We faced constructs, we faced devices. Seriously, what do you want from me, you stupid Limos? Why are you so eager to drain life from me? Go and find life for yourselves. Gosh, it takes ages to kill them. Just the same mobs around these areas. Who's that shining over there? It's Cinderbone! Yes, the skeleton monster hero, and we haven't actually faced him in this playthrough yet, so it's nice that he made an appearance just before the end of Act 1. So I think we pretty much faced every skeleton monster hero within this playthrough. Well, with the ones which appear in Act 1, there actually some appear in later acts as well. But the ones within the Act 1, we actually faced them all. Gosh, more Limos. They wouldn't leave me alone, would they? Die, bitches, die! Gotta be speeding up through this. You should see how long it takes on normal speed. Well, alright then, looks like we've reached the next rebirth fountain. And this is the last rebirth fountain before the Minotaur boss and the Telkine. So we're gonna stop here, and we'll continue and fight the two bosses in the next episode. Bye bye then.